Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Coach's Corner. I know we had a little hiatus, but we all been quite busy, and we have a special guest. What's up, Aaron? How you doing?
Hello, I am Moist Aaron. I'm so good at this game. Hello.
All right, and the topic for today, I know everyone's talking about Steve, so we had to squeeze him in for this podcast here. But we're gonna be comparing Steve and Aegis and really talk about these two characters. I think both of these characters. I don't know if I would say Steve is going to slowly become the backbone of the meta, whether you like play Steve or you have to know how to play against Steve. You essentially have to beat Steves to win tournaments now. We've gotten to the critical mass point. You have to beat Steves, probably multiple of them, to win a tournament. So, and then I think the same goes with Aegis as well. I think you're probably going to have to fight an Aegis. And it's kind of weird because I feel like we're starting to get more Steve than Aegis. Does that sound weird? But I mean,
No.
In
I
tough
know,
cuts, yes. In tough cuts, yes. We're gonna
right,
see more Steves.
right, and I mean, Spargo said he's coming back, and Spargo was also like Cloud Aegis player, so I think Spargo coming back will put more Aegis into the ecosystem, especially at that top cut. But yeah, interesting, really interesting topic, and obviously, we usually go over the history of the characters, but all these characters are very new. So I guess I'll start off with my piece. I think Steve is the best character by far, and it's not even close, and it's gonna get worse. That is my opinion. And I know there's characters that like on paper should beat the character, but when you have the out of just like getting a hit and winning the game, and just remember that all the Steve combos we see now, like no offense to the Steve players, but like they're not even half as good as they should be. You know what I'm saying? Like I don't really see Steve's going for no combos because you don't need to go for no combos. Like I went into training mode for 5 minutes and I can do triple up tilt, up air, throw down a block into double like up air into back air fair. Like that it is not hard to
It's
do.
it's funny. The only top Steve right now, Yanni, that does any of that stuff, was he like one of two that plays top 32, or I
Yeah.
guess, or no, not top 32.
9
Him
in
and
top
Jake,
64.
yeah. Him and Jake got 33rd, but yeah, Yanni's the only one pushing the combo game, and he's pretty consistent at it too. But he still only got 33rd. I don't really, guess you don't need him right now, but they
Yeah.
will get better at the combos for sure.
And I'm just trying to think long term. Like, and this is me thinking long term. Like, I think right now, Steve isn't the best character by far. Like at the moment, like what we're seeing Steve gameplay wise, but on paper, what the character can do, and I guarantee that by 1 to 2 years from now, Steves are gonna find even more tech that we don't even know about yet. Like this character is not done getting better by any means, like in any field. Like everything can be better about this character. And the only thing I can see that's going to get stronger about Pyra and Mithra is optimization of foresight and like maybe flick shotting in neutral, because I think flick shotting in neutral is like pretty strong with certain characters, but it's like those are two very like niche things that I don't like. Even if you master flick shot or slingshot, or you master foresight, I don't see it pushing the characters that much farther. And I think foresight particularly is probably the strongest thing about Mithra, but yeah, I don't know. I just don't like. Let's go, Void.
Okay,
Let's go, Void!
I
Evo
was just
champ,
watching
Evo
his
champ.
stream.
There he is.
Huh? They can get better at Lightning Buster confirms from Void. That is a big thing.
True.
But
Lightning Buster.
like
Facts.
for me, I just don't feel like even if you push Mithra's punish game, it's like it's weird because I feel like the character's strong because you hit advantage state, and then if you're fundamentally good at just like reacting and positioning, you should get a bunch of damage on top of that. That's what I feel like Mithra's strong.
So you
Obviously,
think
they can
Steve is the
optimize.
best? Where's Mithra and Pyra? Where are they?
I'll put them two. I'll put them two.
Just
Like I
straight
still
Number two? Okay.
yeah, because I mean I still think Mithra is broken. Like I just feel like when a top player with really good fundamentals are playing on point, you you are so powerful in a sense where it's like, yep, I just follow you with my broken walk or broken run, and I up air you. You can't contest it. I should get free damage, or I should trap your air dodge into some other combo, right? Like it feels like guaranteed advantage state, right? Unless you have a character like Steve where you really like your disadvantage is so nuanced and you have so many mix-ups. And that's the thing about Steve where I think is like even though you might not have the greatest like mobility and neutral and stuff, every other part of his kit just complements like that weakness so well. Let me build blocks. Let me get rewarded for not interacting with you, right? You have to tear down the blocks eventually. Now, there's characters that are really good at doing this, like Cloud and etc. So I think Pyra is another character that's extremely good at tearing down walls. Pokemon Trainer, right? And I can't even think. There's one character in the game that I can think of that might get more from not interacting with you, and it's Hero, where it's just like, okay, you got your diamond. I don't care. You can. I got roasted on Twitter today because some Steve told me that you can hold 9 diamonds, but apparently it's 4. Whatever. 4
You
and
can
9 are
hold
like
4 diamonds.
yes, apparently.
I've
Well, that's
never
what
seen
this
4
person
diamonds.
on Twitter said. I at this point, I'm just not gonna like everyone roast me so hard for misinformation, and I'm just literally saying what other people tell me. So I'm not even gonna say that's. I've never labbed it out myself.
It literally doesn't even matter because when you build a new tool, you use one
Yeah.
of the diamonds and then you don't get to the next. So, like, maybe if someone decides to mine with their raw, like with their fists for literal minutes, then yes, that is relevant information. But yeah,
You
either
can
way,
hold
I
more
get
than
what you
2.
mean.
That's for
Yeah,
sure, and
that's the
that's
important
you
part.
can hold more than 1. You can hold more than 2. That's the broken thing. The fact that you can just like store up because that's pretty much the relevant numbers, right? If
But
you
is
can,
diamond even his best tool? I think gold is his best by far, to be honest.
yeah. I mean, but it just has very little durability. And then like
It's
I think in stray hit situations, you kind of want diamond just because it's stronger but not fast. It's not as fast as gold, right? And you have a little bit of durability. I'm not is durability gets used when you hit on block. I would assume. I'm not 100% sure on
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
So it's like
I think so.
when you're spacing back airs or fairs with gold, like even if you hit their shield, like it's eventually gonna break. So
I think
I
it
don't. It's,
depends a lot on the matchup though, because I feel like so playing Shulk, right? Shulk is a Steve counter. And looking at my friends play similar like mid-range sword characters, I feel like a lot of the mid-range characters can just avoid getting hit by most of Steve's combo starters, right? And then a lot of the damage racking that Steve gets comes from stray hits, right? So like a forward air jump read, back air jump read, or like a dash attack or a dash grab, stuff like that. And in those situations, you would much rather have diamond because then what because like look at it this way, right? If you have gold, you hit like, let's say 4 stray hits, I'm not even scared. If you hit me with 4 stray hits in diamond, I'm in kill percent afterwards because it's still diamond. So in that sense, I feel like in a lot of matchups, diamond is still like better, even though gold technically has like more utility, more safety. Just
speed.
the sheer reward off of the stray hits, which Steve, I mean, to be fair, I feel like as people get better and better at the matchup, I feel like we're gonna see more people play specifically this around like combo starters and open themselves up to more stray hits through that. Because right now, what you see is that people if you give, for example, Dash Attack too much respect, like he's gonna use that respect to get in and up tilt you. It's kind of like the Wario thing. I don't know, like what you saw when Glitney went to America for the first time after COVID. A lot of people would just like hold shield when he had waft, and instead of him taking the neutral B bites, he would try to like open them up and get his combo starters, but like good luck. They're just like, I'm just gonna, you just bite me. The risk reward is a lot better than me trying to avoid your combo starter. And that's kind of like the same thing that I feel like we're gonna see with Steve, because again, his attributes are subpar. His combo starters are generally limited, right? They're good moves, but it's kind of like when you play against Ryu and Ken, what's your focus? It's to make sure they never get next to you in the first place. It's gonna be this. It's the same for Steve, right? You make sure that he never gets next to you to even up tilt your shield in the first place. And at that point, when combos are really going to be a rarity, well, that's where stray hits become, a lot more powerful, and that's where Steve. I mean, Steve can still succeed in that dynamic, in my opinion, but um, I think a lot of the matchups that people see as counters, like for example, Zero Suit, are only going to get worse as people get more precise at playing around that. Because something that I think is super understated is that like Steve is so new that people still they don't know the dynamic, or let's put it this way, they don't know the dynamic of how to play against Steve by heart. I saw Gluteny like analyze his own set versus Onin, and he was like, "Yeah, I practiced a lot against Steve, and I try to think about it a lot, but I just don't know how to play this dynamic by heart, which made me make a lot of errors, which I think is also true, right? Like Steve is a complex character, which means he can do a lot of things, but it also means that there's a lot of precision and nuance to the way that you counterplay him. And in that sense, like I'm probably one of the only people in the Smash community who thinks that nowadays. Oh, there goes Tony.
Howdy.
But welcome back. But I don't think Steve is the undisputed number one because I think there's so much more to be developed in terms of counterplay. And I don't mean just like, oh, you can do this interaction to counterplay this thing that Steve does, but more so in terms of like people like naturally countering what Steve is trying to achieve. I think that's like a huge part of meta development.
Is always right.
No, wait, don't. Aaron.
Is always
Career
right.
killer.
Aaron, come on, man.
There's one thing you.
We're 10 minutes in.
Yeah, it feels like it. There's one thing that you said earlier about you're more scared of diamond stray hits because of kill percent. But if we touch on the whole theoretical Steve thing that Charles mentioned, I really am more scared of gold. You're at kill percent at 0. We've seen so many different routes with any tool because of nil and every other tech that Steve has, that I'm just more scared of a gold stray hit if you're talking theoretically in general. And honestly, I think gold is really strong too, because if you notice a lot of the ways that these Steves get stray hits, it's by abusing the deceptive FAF of dare, side B, things like that, to set up your opponent to be in like a position where you can get a stray hit. And like gold is a lot quicker, so it'll be a lot easier to hit them after you displace them with one of your projectiles, I think.
Fair. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair. I personally, I think it depends on how good people get at playing around those traps. Because right now, like minecart is definitely like Steve's main neutral tool, right? Like Steve throws out a minecart, you have to deal with minecart. He jumps out, he chases you down. What do you do about it? Most people don't know what to do about it, and I think there are a lot of like counterintuitive answers, like just like kind of like rushing into it if you have the right moves, blah blah blah.
Right.
That make it a lot like less of a trap. You know how like at the beginning of Ultimate, everyone got hit by like snake stuff, and then all the Brawl veterans were like, "Hey, you know what? Maybe you shouldn't do, like the things that Snake want you to do." And over time, like I think it's to me like a relatively recent thing where people are like, "Hey, maybe Snake is not as good as we thought." Now that we understand the character more, there's a lot of potential for Steve to go the same way, because a lot of the things that he does or the things that he succeeds with now are kind of fake.
Yeah.
And the question is like, will he build stuff that can be just as potent without being fake? Or is this like what he has to rely on? And when it's, out of the picture, is he still that strong? That's what I think. And I know, Tony, I'm actually interested to hear what you have to think about this, because I know last Steve episode that we did, you had a lot of opinions on what Steve could be, right? Like a melee, no lag, nil down tilt wave dashing monster. And
The Shoto.
I
The
want to
best
see
Shoto of them all.
exactly the number one show. I want to see what the ultimate Steve Doomer has to say about my Steve positivity.
Well, let me first
You
say
are the leader of the Steve Doomers. I'm sorry, Tony.
I do what I can. What's funny is I think Steve is the best theoretical character based on a very exciting character. Like my vision of Steve is a very fun to watch, very enjoyable, very deep character with a very large series of skill gaps where you really know who the best Steve is going to be, because you're gonna. It is assuming that it is operated around nil and things like nil, cancel, down tilt. Like nil down tilt is one of the strongest positions in the game, because if you touch somebody's shield with down tilt, you can follow that up into guaranteed shield stabs or shield stab mix-ups with down tilt or short hop up air, landing up air, things like that, where you maintain.
Is that
frame
true? I
advantage.
thought there's like a 4-frame gap between down tilt hits, or 6-frame gap between down
There
tilt hits.
is, but
4-frame.
you can
Yeah.
do like Bayo-esque down tilt traps where you poke at them and then you essentially cover their follow-up position, and you're safe pretty much the whole time, and it's just a matter of like reactionary confirms. So my perspective is that essentially the question is, well, how do you keep Steve from getting in those positions? And generally it's by you just swing. Like if you just swing out an aerial, he can't set up a block. In which case, Steve is baiting you into using whiffed aerials. And so the question is, at what point does the meta reach where players can consistently whiff punish things? And we are starting to reach the point in the game because, as I recall, a common sentiment in most of Ultimate has been that you can't really whiff punish things. However, I think what we're seeing more often is that people are whiff punishing things at higher levels of play. And obviously, Aaron is going to be more familiar with that than most because he's one of the people who's doing it. So the
Hey, he has banana. He has banana though.
Yo, banana is not
Doing it
good.
without
That's
Diddy, though.
but
banana.
we're not talking about banana, but
No. Yo, dude,
that's
you're right. You're with punishing through sheer just you could do it with Ganondorf, I believe.
I could with punish a minecart. With fair.
So the idea is that when you start controlling what your opponent is doing through conditioning by just having that powerful tool, you don't actually have to block in order to make people play around block. And so, like on the mental component that's there, we're not even there because that part of Steve doesn't exist right now. Like I don't remember the last time I saw Steve nil down tilt as part of their neutral. So the at least in a tournament match, I definitely sit all the time on Wi-Fi sets, and whenever Acola is ruining somebody's life. So the idea is that these aspects of Steve are something to look forward to. It's not something to be scared of. It's not something to be sad about. It's an exciting part of the game. It still has counterplay. It is still going to be interactive. I personally am looking forward to it. I also, to be fair though, I have enjoyed every Smash's in game as far as what the metagame looks like. I enjoyed Bayonetta. I enjoyed the characters beating Bayonetta. I was
main
still
Meta
helping
Knight?
people. Yeah, I main Meta Knight. I enjoyed Meta Knight. Meta Knight Mirror is my favorite Smash matchup of all time to this day. So it's perspective. With that said, I think that the way Steve develops and the way Aegis develops are going to be very different, both in the near future in general. So the thing about Aegis is right now, the best Aegis of every Aegis is someone who basically reached that point with other characters and then just use Aegis. So
Who's the best Aegis according to you, Tony?
Spargo, Leo, Cosmos,
Shuton?
Shuton's in there. Like they're people who are known for being top players with other characters who play Aegis. So
right, yeah.
The idea is these are not character specialists by any means. And so when we look at how people develop a character as a secondary mindset, or when it is not essentially the root of their understanding through the game, it affects how people tend to learn and view concepts. Steve players tend to look at it as, well, what would a Steve do to solve this problem? Whereas Aegis players are likely to look at it as well, what's really busted that I couldn't do here with my normal character that Aegis can do, because I have this option or that option, because she has multiple aerial defensive options in both air dodge and switch. Switch is very powerful and underutilized, I think, right now. I believe I've mentioned this before, but so switch is an issue going on forward, not because of its ability as a defensive tool. From my perspective, switch needs to be addressed more in neutral. So the idea is that it's 32 frames total, which is fully reactable. However, the issue with that is that if you are at a distance, then it is not very reactable, because you have to understand that you are reacting with something that is going to be more burst, more committal, usually something like a dash attack, dash grab mix-up, except which makes it worse as Mithra using switch. But the thing is that if Mithra can bait you by just doing something like a crouch or using some sort of tell to feint using switch beforehand, then she's winning the game just by having the move on her moveset. And whereas characters like Pyra already want you at a distance. So one of the issues that I think a lot of people have with Pyra and playing against Pyra is that they try to punish her attacks directly. But most Pyra players are generally going to undershoot their attacks. They're not trying to pressure your shield. They're trying to cover your jump ins, your dash ins, your forward movement, and protect themselves with it. And so usually what I recommend to people is don't punish Pyra, punish her follow-up option, or position yourself so that you can go in deep and catch her off guard on the second. and this has worked out for most people that I have helped with the matchup. And except when you're doing that and you're playing it within this context, all of a sudden, if your solution is, I'm not going to try and punish the next thing Pyra does, I'm going to try and position myself to punish this follow up, and then she switches, then you are not really in a position to do it. And obviously, the final level is, well, you just don't try and punish it, except that's not a level that we are currently at. So this would be a new position, a new thing that Aegis players would be doing. And what you're going to see is you're just going to see Pyra players going out fainting like a retreating fair, and then they just switch, and then they put out like a Mithra roll or something.
I'd love to touch on this if you don't mind. You're
I'd love
absolutely
to
right. I just played Leo a few days ago at SmashCon, and a majority of the set was Aegis. And actually, VOD reviewing it, I noticed exactly what you're saying. I'm like, okay, all he's doing is he's dashing back, he's doing down tilts, he's doing fair, he's trying to, and it catches me. It catches my Diddy, like side B, dash attack and stuff. And that's my solution going forward, is to punish the follow-up option. So now that you add this whole layer of switching as like a bait, now I'm scared. I'm very scared. I didn't even consider that. Like, honestly, yeah, I think more liberal switching going forward will make Aegis a lot better. And I'm not somebody that thinks Aegis is that good, honestly, theoretically or specifically practically. I'm like more of a, I guess, here and now practical player when it comes to talking about the meta. When I do tier lists and stuff, it's pretty hypothetical, and I kind of get roasted for it. But yeah, that is an interesting point. I just like to say, like, you're absolutely right. Like, that's that.
Like at the end though, like switching is kind of like fake pressure though, because like if you cannot do anything about Pyra switching to Mithra, then there's no reason to pressure it. And if Mithra switching to Pyra is usually a bad thing for them neutral wise, it also doesn't make sense to like pressure it too much. So I don't really see how it slots into her.
Well, the fact that you're
gameplay.
moving backwards, I can say that if you're moving backwards and they're playing around a potential swing, you getting free switches like that, I think can be very strong, and also just keeps.
But what do you get out of the switch though?
You
That's
bait the
if they
opponent
come
to
in.
come
If
out.
they come in, you're essentially
it's them
doing
to-
like a intangible drift back kind of thing. That's how I
right,
see
like
it.
a spot dodge cancel s.
But like
idea.
you're drifting back, right? And they're trying to compensate over like like a Pyra fair, right? And they're respecting the Pyra fair. And obviously, like say you want to get a switch into Mithra because Mithra is generally better in neutral, right? But they're respecting this one option, and then getting free switches in those scenarios, especially from Pyra to Mithra, I think is very important. Specifically,
Pyra to Mithra sounds like it has potency.
You're upgrading your net.
That's
neutral, right?
that's kind of what I'm talking about. Yeah,
that's fair enough. That's fair enough. If it's Pyra to Mithra, yeah, but I don't like. I feel if you're playing most of your neutral with Mithra anyway, then it doesn't really sound like a core component to what you want to be doing.
Which is right, but yeah, like that's something I noticed about Leo. Again, going back to my set with him, is he and watching him this weekend as well. He's stuck on Pyra, and I think maybe he even understands like the next layer that could be implemented with the switches. And I was just thinking, like, while I was playing him, like, why am I losing to this Pyra? And then also, why are you not switching to Mithra? So, like, I don't know. It's interesting.
That's fair. Yeah.
Well, that situation is actually kind of common in my opinion, because you go Mithra neutral, win neutral for free because you're Mithra advantage state. Oh, I want advantage state that can KO. Switch to the shittier character, but she's stronger, right? So it's like I'm juggling. Boom. I think you're gonna drift this way, so I'm gonna like run, switch, follow your drift with the switch. Right now I'm Pyra. Did you switch your drift? No. Okay, I can maybe get an up air trap, more activity, more range. Right? Oh, it didn't work out. Fuck. I'm in neutral with Pyra. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like
you're absolutely right that's where the standard has been for Aegis. Yeah, me playing her as well a lot. But I just theorizing thought that going forward we would only use Pyra in ledge trapping, juggling, etc., and switch to Mithra because she has objectively like the best neutral in the game in my opinion, or like maybe second best or something, like top 3.
It's definitely up there for sure.
It's very
yeah, it's one of the best.
So like I don't know, I'm just surprised by it. Like that is, you're right, like that's where the character has been, but I thought we would already see some more shifts into limiting Pyra usage. So it's interesting to see like going forward.
It's funny because I feel like when Leo picked up Aegis, he just played Pyra only. I feel like I don't know if you
His
guys
Pyra
saw
is
like his
really
stream
good.
because like
It's-
he plays Pyra as if she's Smash 4 Corrin, basically.
he said he likes Pyra more too.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Like I played Smash 4 Corrin, I saw him play Pyra. I was like, he's playing Corrin. He's playing this. He's playing that character. And like Leo, look at his characters, right? Like he played, a good amount of Corrin in Smash 4. In this game, he has a Byleth. And like in general, he's just super familiar with the whole dynamic. He had a really good Ike too, of like slow sword fighter with big sword. And that slow speed, it because of how strategical he plays, right? Because of his positioning, it's so preemptive. The slow speed matters a lot less, whereas the bigger sword matters a lot more because he's using that to like threaten the spaces that he wants to occupy. Which kind of segues into my opinion on Aegis, which is that like I feel like the better Pyra gets, the better Aegis gets. Because Mithra, I feel like foresight is like a huge part that can be optimized more. That like that aspect of Mithra is just absolutely insane. I feel like a lot of multi hits you can foresight like on option select, not on reaction, but on option select. Foresight against like projectile characters shouldn't be able to do things in a lot of situations where they get away with it now. Like I know using Young Link as an example, right? Like if you see a boomerang, you roll in. If you see a fire, you roll in, and like he just gets hard punished.
Is Foresight frame 1? I'm actually not sure.
No, it's not frame.
I think it's frame 1, isn't it? Or is it?
I
frame
think
2?
it's frame 2. The
Okay.
Spaldog version is frame 2. So it's just a really good tool, and like the fact that she can reversal it into like a full combo or a KO because her forward smash is still, even after the nerf, ridiculously strong. I have no idea why they made that forward smash. That's actually insane. So foresight improvements are huge, but also like Pyra, right? And in that sense, I think if you compare Leo to other Aegis, the biggest difference is that like his Pyra is not just like the killing machine. It's an actual character. And I'm kind of surprised, like low key, that Cosmos' Pyra is not like super OD. Because Cosmos played Corrin too. And again, like it's not the same character, but they have a lot of similarities.
Well, if you think about for Cosmos, I'd like to say in particular, in Ultimate, he's always played that quick playstyle with Inkling in the beginning too.
True.
I think it's a really quick and easy transition. Like that's why I'm a lot more Mithra based too, is because I made Inkling for like the first year. It's a lot more natural to switch to that character.
That makes
coming
sense.
from that perspective.
Yeah. But the thing that I like the most about Aegis is that I feel like for like every threat in the game, they have some sort of answer. Like especially Mithra. And that is, I think, in terms of like potential meta growth, it's not like the character itself is going to get a lot crazier, but if you always have an answer, that means that like as the meta grows, as people get better at every matchup, which again, Aegis, just like Steve, right? Like an entirely new character, people don't know exactly how to play against the character. As people get better and better at the matchup, you will always have answers that will be solid enough in risk reward. Whereas I feel like a character like Steve, there will probably be some matchups where like just due to the uniqueness of his kit and like the lack of well-roundedness, so to say, there will be characters that just like through the way that they function will limit what Steve can do, and just like through toolkit just have a winning matchup. Whereas I feel like for Aegis, that losing matchup can still be there, but it's going to be more because of the risk reward than the tools, because that character, like you throw them off stage, it can get bodied. They have some limitations in neutral, like for example, right, like Mithra's rising aerials, she has Nair, which is relatively committal, but her other aerials also aren't amazing in a neutral rising situation, right? You do rising fair, doesn't auto cancel. Rising Nair, Lex range, rising down air, up air don't really apply. I'm hoping we're gonna see more like run up rising back air, because I feel like it's just a straight up better rising fair.
Yeah, I've been spamming that. Yeah,
it's good. It's really good because like her dash attack is OD. You cannot jump in on her, but that diagonal, she can kind of struggle to cover that. And kind of like Greninja, what she does is she waits for you to land, and then she can contest your landing, and that's like super fucked up. Like you cannot do much about that. But if you can contest them before the landing, well, that's really good. And I feel like that's like a blind spot. Another part is, of course, like Mithra's defensive options are a little bit laggier. Like her spot dodges and rolls are all, well, I don't even want to say a little bit. They're significantly more laggy than other spot dodges and rolls. So there's like still some room for the character to be abused more. But just the way that Mithra plays neutral means that she will never like lose a matchup because of how a tool set works. Outside of maybe like very unique characters, like say a Min Min, like I can see like maybe in the long term, like a Min Min can be like really rough. Because but that's not because of how Aegis works, but more because of how super specific a Mimic would be. But even then, like foresight optimizations might be huge in that matchup, and there's always a lot to explore. But yeah, that's why generally I feel like if we're talking about like long term, and I'm talking like 2-3 years in the future, I feel like Aegis is going to be way more solid than Steve. But at the same time, it's like, again, it depends on how the Steve meta develops, because if he gets stuff that compensates for the things that we know can be counterplayed more efficiently now, then Steve is going to be a terror.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if we're going to get there. If we're going to get to no impact landing down till neutral land, I don't know if we're going to get there.
We won't. We will not.
Probably not. I think that it is realistic to reach that. So I usually tend to place the max tech level of what a Smash game is going to reach pretty below what most people I talk to would expect it to be. Just because I don't think people are going to do that much to improve on a technical level. To continue back with what my point about Aegis was, though, is that I think most of what Aegis currently exists is, or rather Aegis's current limit, is the perspective of the users of Aegis don't look at Aegis as Aegis. They look Aegis through the lens of being a different character, and then how those tools would work within that character's moveset. And so there's enough Aegis players that we're effectively overcoming this right now. But like an example would be, I think in the last couple weeks, Leo has developed using Foresight specifically as a Joker counter.
Yes.
So the exact way he used Joker counter is how he'll look for Foresights, and he does it intentionally, and you can tell he does. And it's very oppressive, which I'm sure Aaron can.
I was just gonna say, I know I keep mentioning my set with him, but bro, his foresights, like,
it's really strong.
Man, they're so good. I've never fought anything like that.
He's the only Aegis I know of who currently does it, and it's not that other. Actually, it could be that other Aegis players just can't. Spargo obviously can, but I think that's one of those cases where reaction times and talent actually is going to function as a barrier for how well you can use Aegis. Is your ability to raw react with foresight is actually going to hard bottleneck you in certain places, which also is where I was going with Steve. And to back up what Aaron was saying about gold tools, I can't tell you how many times where I have been trying to go over how to handle a given position with Steve and said, oh, yeah, you can react to this by dropping shield and then you'll parry the next button, or you can do this out of shield option. And then, unless they have gold, and that's pretty much always how that sentence works, is unless they have gold, then you can't actually. So if they have gold, a lot of these otherwise confirmable positions, even for players like Leo, are no longer reactable. So gold is just too fast to be humanly reactable in a lot of situations where every other tool, including diamond, is. And so the spare, essentially the floor level of how bad things can go wrong with diamond is very high. Like things don't go wrong with diamond as much. Like even if you drop a hit, it's just a normal characters, like up tilt, normal characters up air. It's not particularly good, but it's not like you're gonna think, oh man, I just hit him with the Falco laser. Like it deals damage. It progresses you toward points where you're going to get stray hits. That stray hit percentage is pretty early. So for, I think, weaker Steve players, Diamond is better the weaker of a player you are. I would not say that is true across the board right now, but more of like in terms of like a philosophical scale. I know in Miya versus Cola, or Acola, this past week, for example, that Acola was using a lot of diamond. He was specifically going for stray hits intentionally, and specifically going for lots of preemptive anti-air swings to keep out Miya. And then you can see Miya adapting through the set by converting his aerial approaches into ground approaches. And it's actually the final adaptation for that set is actually Acola basically just going for standard Steve stuff. And so you can actually witness a whole rock paper.
They went full circle, yeah.
Yeah, they have a full rock paper scissors of adaptation in the set, and that actually is one of the things that I think sets Acola apart from every other Steve player right now. Is that he? That's one of the main things. Acola actually has rock paper scissors level of adaptation. So even if you can beat the things he does, he is capable of perceiving that you figured it out and then switching to a counter to your counter, and he'll always have a counter available. So for every other Steve player in the world, I think it's a matter of if you can figure out how to play well enough against him, and you actually just know the answers and can execute it, you are going to beat almost every other Steve player on the world right now, including Onin. I want to be clear on that. He is a solid player. Like, he actually, without Steve, I think he would still make it out of pools at these big tournaments. However, if you look at the actual interactions with especially like in the top eights, you can see that on an execution and reaction level, and part of that is because of Onin's inexperience. He's still a fairly new player relative to everyone else in that top eight, who was an established multi-year veteran who just goes to plenty of top eights, and this is not their first rodeo. So that's part of it. But you can really see that these top players were still able to overwhelm him, and then we're losing on risk reward, running into fairly janky setups that they shouldn't get hit by. You shouldn't be getting hit by down air, back air, shield breaks. That's not real.
Yep.
So, like, all of these players are skilled enough players that they should be able to consistently parry Steve down air on reaction. It is a reactable move, and these players didn't really have an
First hit
excuse
or the
other than
second hit?
ready. The first hit.
Okay, yeah.
So you're not getting your shield broken by the second hit. You're getting hit because you took multiple shields on block and then you commit to holding the shield. Like, it's so fake that you accidentally get hit by the second hit when you try and shield it sometimes. So it just doesn't work like that. So my point being, though, is that I think that it was a combination of a high level player was using Steve, and he is a gap above, I would say, almost every other Steve player and who was in that bracket. Actually, I would say Onin is a gap as a skill level player above every other Steve player who was in that bracket. And there was there was 8 other players in that top 64, which even without Onin still leaves you with more than 12% of the bracket being Steve out of pools. So Steve right now, I think, is performing pretty well. So I think that right now, as a character, the reason Steve is performing well, and this was something I think I was alluding to when we were discussing the character before, is the skill he tests. It's not some like flat linear thing where you just say, oh, well, if Leo was using Steve, he would be carried this high. That's not how that works. It's an entirely separate skill level. It expands in a dimension, like it expands out this way toward you, where you're just it's an entirely separate skill set from what most things in Smash are, and your ability to execute it are dependent on the practice that you have put into practicing specifically that. So it's not just a matter of whatever Smash skill you have, you can just pick up the character and it's going to go that. I think pretty much every player in the world who has never played Steve is going to pick up Steve, and they're probably not going to be good at Steve. The character has separate but still very consistent skill recognition and skill reward, and every single Steve player, I feel, gets rewarded for the practice they put into the character, and I think that he is rewarded for labbing, for practicing more than most of the characters in the game. And obviously that's how I'm going to feel if I think that he's also theoretically the most difficult to play character, or among them anyways. So I think he's rewarded for it. I think that we're at right now is that some of the things he does are rewarding enough that you don't need to do hard things with Steve. So, like, a lot of his relatively easy to do things are just a matter of maximizing a very specific skill subset, which is resource acquisition. I think what sets the top Steves apart from every other Steve is their ability to have the resources to access the easy bake options. Your minecart, your down air, just retreating back airs. Aside from that, the other main thing that I would say sets top Steves apart from other Steves, not including like Yanni, for example. And one of the things that other top Steves do better than Yanni is they actually use stage control and take value of people chasing them into the corner. Mm-hmm. But even then, there is a significant skill gap in their ability to leverage stage control, and specifically turn center into being a reward.
Yeah.
From Acola and every other Steve. So I actually, I was heat mapping, I believe it was Onin's sets from the weekend and Acola's sets from the weekend, and you can actually regularly see Acola pull up and then feint people out, act like he's going to wall into the corner, and then come back to center. And then if the opponent goes into the corner, they straight up stuck there. And if they try to jump back over to the wall to center, there is a level of RPS that I think most top players don't even realize exists in the matchup. Every time one of you is trying to pass a wall, there is a series of interactions, and each interaction has its own counter. And part of the reason top players just lose on the spot 2 walls is because they don't recognize that that aspect of the game even exists. So they just pick the same option every single time. And so they pick the same options. They're very predictable. And every Steve player in the world is going to recognize, oh, hey, they're trying to bust through my wall. I'm just going to hit them for it. And this is my counter to that. This is my counter to that. I know these, and you're just picking the same thing every single time. And then the only real mix-up that people will mix up there is, am I going to break through the wall now, or am I going to do it later? And so it's super simple to counter as the Steve player. Yeah. And it's an aspect of the game that I think most of the top players who are in these top 8s don't even recognize exists, because they just don't know the matchup well enough to know that.
It's actually interesting coming from a Diddy's perspective, where my entire game plan is looking for a safe way to pull banana. I think it's really similar. So like when I watch Steve players, I always notice like, oh, they're dashing back, they're looking to put a wall. But as a Diddy, I always dash back to bait an approach to make, because I know my opponent thinks, oh, he wants to pull banana. Same exact thing when I played Steve. Yep. I just I did exactly what you're saying. Dash back, bait the wall, and then they're stuck. And I think, again, Steve has some of the best displacing aerials and projectiles in the game. So you can really, really capitalize on stage control.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I love how we're talking about in terms of being rewarded for skill. I think characters skill is a very blanket term, but essentially being rewarded for being able to recognize a situation. And I've said this before, like your refresh rate, which is essentially like how fast you can constantly react with putting low efforts into it, right? Any speed character, in a sense where your moves have fast startup and they also have really low lag, so they just end up like Steve up tilt, Mithra, anything, right? Or any other tilts, like down tilt or something like that. Like when you're ledge trapping with Mithra, yes, it's extremely broken, but like first down tilt, second down tilt, third down tilt, that all happened within a span of not even a second or maybe a second, around there, right? And you have to react. A not so good player, like a high level player, probably just does a sequence and like, I'm just gonna do this sequence and see what happens. I'm gonna do double down tilt and then go into shield. I hope they normal get up, and then I react to that and grab, right? But then really, really good players, like top level players, they're doing down tilt, react. Down tilt, what's the situation? Down tilt again, what is the situation? Oh, they're still hanging on ledge. Now I down tilt again because I'm not autopiloting into the shield expecting this option, right? And that's why I just think these two characters are so, like, they're going to be so strong because, and I think Pyro Mithra is a lot easier to just pick up as a pocket, which is why we actually see that a lot in top level play. We only see really one dedicated Pyro Mithra player, right, being Cosmos. And kind of Shuton at this point. I feel like Shuton's kind of making a good switch over, but it'll be really interesting. I heard Shuton played Steve at a tournament.
He has, yeah.
So
I even heard that he labbed Steve together with Acola, so they're like Steve buddies. So
oh man,
a lot of people are like, Shuton is finally not just pulling out the Steve, but finally pulling out the Steve. So if that is true, if that's not like just a Twitter little bit of wisdom from someone who doesn't know shit.
Oh no, it was a Japanese player that said that. Shuton played Steve in the beginning, and then Acola actually took inspiration from him.
That's insane.
Played Steve because of it.
Shuton
also hates Steve.
Because, but the thing is, Aaron, what you were saying about like Diddy resource acquisition carrying over to Steve, the same goes for Olimar, because Pikmin is resource acquisition at its finest, and in fact, it's a little bit more comparable to Steve because it's a little bit more long term than just like plucking a banana and being there. You have to like cycle your Pikmin, managing it, kind of the same thing. So in that sense, a lot of fundamental skills already there. Anyway, Charles, continue.
Spreadsheeting.
But yeah, it's just, I think a top player picking up Steve and committing to Steve sounds very deadly, but at the same time, and I know Aaron actually played a lot of Steve, and then you switched, so
Yeah.
I don't know what you're doing there, but
I got
You're
my
bringing it back?
comments. I'll wait. Nah,
okay,
you
okay. But it's hard, right? Because Steve is the most not Smash character we've had, and that's usually going to be the case. Because even when you think about Bayo, right? Bayo, extremely strong character, right? But when you think about it, it kind of like I'm spacing you out with back air, I'm poking you with down tilt, right? I'm going in with side B, burr, like if this is my
Burst
combo
range,
starter
yeah.
move, like oh my counter. I mean, obviously stupid broken counter, but it was a counter, right? So I mean, obviously she had a bunch of other stuff that made her extremely broken, but base functionality, like when you're playing neutral against her, it's like this is her burst options, yada yada yada, right? She's spacing these moves, and like Steve can do that, but Steve also has like a bunch of weird shit that is like, what the fuck is this? Like, okay, minecart, you're going in, but you get out, but it grabs me and I die off of it. But then you can also do this anvil, which is like weird because like it's a stall and fall, but you can hop off of it, but it's a projectile and it kills me at like 70 with bad DI, and you know what I mean? Like Steve has so much, and then blocks. Oh my god, that's like the biggest game changer. Like, okay, I'm kind of fighting Pac-Man Hydrant. Oh shit, like making an L, upside down L. We got some stuff going on here. If I bust the bottom block, can I squeeze my character underneath there? Can I still do a dash tag? Am I too tall? Like, and there's so many different questions, right? And like, there's so many different ways that characters play matches where it's like, okay, I just bust the like, Regalo busting the bottom block and like having an answer to minecart, right? Lucas looked pretty solid against Steve, and Regalo had was stacking up wins on Steve because you could tell he very much so understood like what his win condition was, and having an answer to minecart is such a big
Yup.
deal. So
Yup.
it's like, but on the other side, like some characters don't have those kind of tools, right? And this is why I think, in my opinion, Steve has longevity, because even in the top of my head, mid-range characters are going to beat Steve, or they should, right? Because it's like, okay, I can hit the wall and I can hit you. So because of this
True.
range, like I'm kind of invalidating block. But then on the flip side, it's like, well, I don't have to build a block in front of me. I can build blocks behind me. You're spacing out with a horizontal range option. I can just tech it. I don't care, right? So it's like, just off the top of my head, the biggest counter to Steve, I can already just like, boop, like something Acola does right now. Easy. Like, you know what I'm saying? And obviously there are moves that most horizontal mid-range moves are going to hit you like horizontally, right? Some of them hit at a higher arc. You can build the wall higher. And even then, my thing about Steve as well, it's like there is counterplay to minecart, but there's so many different minecarts, and with gold, that move, you like think about how much distance you have to respect Steve, minecart, and anvil, right? And like just think about that space that you have to like respect Steve at. That's a lot of space. When a
It's a spin
character,
dash.
yes,
It's a spin dash that kills you at 0.
when a character that has no mobility, all of a sudden like you give them mobility options, and then like yes, this character has no mobility, but why are all of a sudden when Steve is in the corner, why are you center stage? Why do you have to respect this character so much? And I'm not even getting into nils. So that's why
Right.
in my head, the longevity of Steve, like there is counterplay, and I do think that the top level players right now are not the greatest at it. Like I feel like a lot of top players are still learning the matchup. They're still losing to like level 1 Steve. They're not forcing Steves
Yep.
to like really go into this RPS, because like, oh, well, yeah, I'm gonna spam minecart, and if you deal 10 damage to me every time, like Ludo was throwing the bike, Onan didn't care. What, you're gonna throw the bike at me again, and I'm doing like what? You do 10 damage to me? I don't care at all,
Mhm.
because I'm gonna keep doing it, and if it hits, I'm gonna up smash you. And like, I know some people were posting tweets of that sequence where Guido like threw the bike twice, got Onan off the minecart, and Onan just kept doing it, right? And then the anvil and all that. People were posting that on Twitter with the circus music, yada yada. Haha, really funny. But in the terms of risk reward, I mean, if I'm
That's
Onan, why
correct.
wouldn't I do that? Y'all are trash
Yeah.
at punishing this move.
So,
I'm just gonna keep
I
doing
mean,
it because I get a
I'm-
KO option out of it.
I'm really
he was at 17% when he started. If I'm at 17, like I'll fish for a combo starter kill, or well, a kill setup. Sure. Right,
I'm really
that's
eager
safe.
to get in here. I notice you say, and this is without talking about nil. Okay, listen, if you're from the future, 2 years, 3 years in the future, if we're even still playing Ultimate at this point, I think Smash 6 is going to be out by then. But you can roast me for this. We don't need to worry about nil. Okay, these Steve players, kind of like what Tony said.
They ain't
I'm
gonna do
also
it.
of the similar. I'm of the similar mindset. I don't think we need to worry about that tech. We need to worry about the here and now. Like I don't
Minecart.
see any point in time where Steve players are ever getting to the point, besides like Yanni pulling it out sometimes in bracket, where you're gonna 0 to death somebody. It's like it's not gonna happen. And like if anything, the nil will only become useful for the niche combo extensions to get like I don't know an up smash earlier or later than you could have or whatever. So here's the thing, right? Just like you said as well, minecart like you can beat it out with a lot of characters. You mentioned Regalo, PK Fire destroys minecart. It's incredibly non-committal, and you can do it if he's in the minecart, out of the minecart. Like there's a lot of moves like that. Talking about Aegis, Pyra Fair is incredibly good against minecart as well. Another really non-committal move that you can just destroy it. You can just destroy it with, again, regardless if Steve is in it or not. And again, like you said as well, Charles, not every character has an option like that, right? So that's why I think Steve is always going to be extremely relevant, the most relevant matchup to learn in the game by far, right? But I don't think he's going to be the best character in the game. I think he's going to rapidly fall off when the majority of the top and high level player base learn the basic ass counters to Steve's incredibly like good options. Like minecart is insane for sure, but because almost every top and high tier character has some way, like I could literally look at the character select screen and name like 2 or 3 things you can do against minecart. Like gold it's harder to granted for a
Way
lot of these
harder, yeah.
characters, but the thing is if you have gold minecart most of the time or 100% of the time you're going to have a diamond tool. And again, I think that gold is practically his best tool as well, based on what Tony said as well, with the whole reacting thing. I think that that's especially going to become relevant with the top players that actually do have the reaction time to punish Steve. If Steve has diamond, he's nowhere near as threatening, especially if you stop getting hit by F smash through a wall on baiting, like stuff like that. Like I think that almost every single thing that Steve players are doing has a basic counterplay. If you're using a good character, and if you're not, honestly, you shouldn't even be part of the discussion. If you're using a gimped character, then you're just going to lose to Steve because, yeah, he's going to matchup check you. You're not going to have the tools. It is what it is,
That is the thing about Steve. Is like if your character loses to Steve, you're definitely in a rougher spot than if your character loses to a character like Aegis. Because Aegis plays such like basic Smash, and there will always be like basic answers.
Yeah, and
but
that's
I feel
your
like
fault.
yeah, that is your fault. Because I feel like if we're like meta wise, a secondary to beat Steve will become more common, and God bless Cloud exists because he's like an easy character who also, well, I don't want to say shits on Steve, but he does pretty damn well in the matchup.
Just like Pyra.
Yeah, no, Cloud. I say Cloud, but Pyra, you can do Pyra too.
No, yeah, both are really easy to pick up.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like for minecart, for example, like if you understand how that move works, like the part where he starts the animation, his hurt box moves back, the minecart replaces where he was. It's kind of like Wario Bike, where if you like throw a move at Wario, like a projectile, and he uses bike, like the bike just like spawns in there and tanks the move. It's the same thing for minecart. So people got to overshoot, but you don't want to overshoot too hard because then you get hit by the anvil, blah blah blah. So there's like some nuance there. Oh, by the way, something you said, Charles, that I think is important too. When you DI anvil wrong, you die at 70. If you get hit by the anvil, that hit lag takes forever. If you get left-righted, which is very common, DI straight down. If you DI straight down, you die like 40% later than if you DI wrong. 40% later. It's about like 10 degrees off of perfect DI. So if you know which left-right it is, it's like a difference of 10%. Just DI straight down against anvil. Most of the time, you'll be fine. And then it still kills at like 110, which is early. But 70, that's like that's
right.
even earlier.
You're doing the option select because it's kind of like
exactly.
You know how if R.O.B will up air you, and you're like, okay, I'm at 80. The only way
just don't
I die is if I DI incorrectly. Just hold down. You hold down, and that helps the angle out. Right? It's not perfect DI, but it's not because bad DI will get like KO you even earlier. So.
I like to be a beast. I like to look at where I'm at visually and perfectly DI every time. There's a trick,
Yeah,
Or
I mean, if
in the
you
corner,
react
yeah.
correctly, right, and like
Dude,
know how to.
I'm an
It's
actual
so
beast.
easy to DI that move. So
When
easy.
I get hit by a R.O.B up air, I open up my side betting server and I just go ham on the side. Anyway, what I think is a bit of a funny topic regarding Steve and Aegis as well is that in a lot of ways they kind of mirror Bayonetta and Cloud in Smash 4, which I think so the way I look at it, right, is that you have a character with a kind of subpar neutral but insane reward and a lot of unique tools. And really, 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 really good disadvantage. That's Bayo and Steve. And then you have the character with insane neutral who has kills out of the wazoo.
Shitty
Also has a
recovery.
few unique mechanics and a shitty recovery, which makes them a lot harder because you need to know a matchup if your recovery is shit. Because if you don't know a matchup and your recovery is bad, you don't know how you get put in a bad situation, and you don't know what exactly to watch out for, what positioning to react to. So in that sense, you have like this character that has, like a lot of checks, but generally mostly relies on having insane disadvantage, which you see at all levels of play, like bad disadvantage or characters whose weaknesses are bad disadvantages generally just destroy like mid and even some of the high level players because of how much pressure it puts on you to actually be good, right? You don't get away with being sloppy if your opponent has bad disadvantage, or yeah, and or if they have good disadvantage. You can see that in a lot of scenarios. So in that sense, like Steve does a lot better because you cannot just rely on being like a bad player with an insane like 5,000 hours of Wi-Fi advantage state, because that doesn't work against Steve. Whereas a character like Aegis, you can be insane Wi-Fi player with 5,000 hours of advantage state, get absolutely bodied, hit them once and kill them, right? So in that sense, Aegis requires a lot more like precision, composure, knowledge, etc. Whereas for Steve, you can get away with, like getting hit by something silly, minecart and block out or anvil, and then go back to neutral. So in that sense, I feel like that dynamic is also a little bit similar. And what I think we're gonna see in terms of matchups as well is that Aegis kind of stabilizes with like a few matchups that are a little bit hard, kind of like Cloud had in Smash 4. And then for Steve, it's a little bit less comparable because Bayonetta arguably had no losing matchups. But what you'll see in terms of dynamics is that there's going to be a few matchups that Steve just destroys just purely by toolset, by moveset. But there's also going to be matches where there's a lot more struggle also because of the moveset. So I think in that sense, the meta, like the comparison is pretty interesting because I think we're going to see a very similar thing play out as in Smash 4. And what we're also going to see similarly to Smash 4 is that people are going to pick up pockets to deal with that. And I feel like it was a little bit harder in Smash 4 because pockets in Smash 4 were a little bit more committal. But as the meta like progressed, a lot of people were like, okay, Bayo is an issue. I cannot fight Bayo with my character. I'm going to pick up something to deal with that. Some Mewtwo players in Europe, for example, had that because Mewtwo Bayo was absolutely atrocious. So they had to pick up something to beat Bayo, and I think you're going to see the same in this game, where it's like, okay, well, like Steve, not as dominant as Bayo, but some characters just cannot feasibly consistently beat Steve. So they're going to have to pick up some sort of second. And I think, to me, that is not the sign of an unhealthy meta game, per se. And I think that is where a lot of the opinions kind of differ when people talk about what is good for the metagame, because a lot of people in Ultimate are spoiled as hell, and they're like, there are 90 characters in this game. I'm going to pick up this mid-tier, and I want to succeed. I want to be able to do anything with my mid-tier. And while SkyJ is really good, I don't think SkyJ would consistently beat Steve's, just by sheer matchup, even though I might be wrong about that. It sounds like an awful matchup for him.
He has a lot of faith in the matchup, apparently. So
okay. Well, in that case, that might have not been the best example, but you get my
Steve at 0.
That would be the Evil.
Yeah.
Dude, I imagine you just build blocks around the stage and Incineroar literally doesn't get, like, he bonks his head on the...
Yeah,
anyway,
mobility,
anyway, the point being, I think having secondaries or needing secondaries to succeed at the top level is not unhealthy, but I think a lot of people nowadays in like the Smash Ultimate cultural zeitgeist think that if you're able to succeed as a solo main with like a lower half of mid tier or lower half of high tier, lower half of high tier, if you get to succeed with a character like that, the meta game is good. Whereas I feel like if you're playing a high tier, you probably need a secondary. Hell, if you're playing a non-top 3 character, you probably need a secondary.
I'm interested because you continuously make the comparison between Steve and Bayonetta and how the games develop there with picking up a secondary. The end game for Smash 4 was that everybody
Everyone
picked up
picks
Bayonetta.
Bayo. Yeah,
Not a
she's
secondary,
simple. That's
but
because
Bayo.
she's simple as fuck. That's because she's simple. But
I'm
looking at it from a European. I'm looking from a European perspective because in Europe it wasn't like everyone picked up a secondary Bayo. So there's a little bit of difference here. Here you saw more like people just picking up like a Diddy to make it a little bit easier to play against Bayonetta, for example.
Diddy were there even any like strong European Bayos though?
There were. You had All Babies who won a major. You had Butter who won a major. You had Samu who is still playing Bayonetta. Surgeon who's also still playing Bayonetta. Those were like the 4 strongest, and 2 of them are still playing Bayo. One of them quit, and the other one switched to Sora. Sora, new Bayonetta confirmed.
Yeah, very smart pick there.
But yeah, like
hey,
to me, it seems like the TLDR is because I do think Pyramithra beat Steve. So
Definitely.
It's like if we take, so in my opinion, if we take like nil and stuff out of the equation, and we feel like we're gonna stay on like pretty base level stuff, I would say in that case, like practicality, Pyramithra is the best right now, just because I think for Steve to be the best, I think he has to do all that tech stuff. He has to like get one hit, and then if you have perfect SDI, like you still take 100 or whatever, right? And you still are alive and whatnot. But Pyramithra seems like they have the more consistent matchup spread, whereas I feel like Steve, the characters you beat, you probably beat them harder, but it's not as consistent. Like his matchup spreads are probably a little bit more volatile. So overall, in his favor over the entire cast, obviously. But Pyramithra feels like just good across the board, right? Like a consistent, like, oh yeah, if I looked at the whole matchup spread, like, oh yeah, like for the most part, I can see soloing Pyramithra is very practical. It's probably the best character to solo main. Whereas Steve, I think it's still possible to solo main Steve and just win, right? Because I think the matchups that Steve loses are still doable for him, especially if you just start hitting harder. Because usually, that's what I want to see. I want to see if people start bringing in these hard matchups or these hard counter picks against Steve, and it forces Steve's to be like, okay, shit, I don't get that much hits. I have to hit harder, right? That to me, that's what the cycle should be. Do we have enough time? Are the Steves going to put the effort into it? I don't know, right? I don't know, but that's generally how a cycle of like, fuck, this matchup sucks. Like when I get a hit, I have to really make it count. I have to do a ton of damage.
That's what the R.O.Bs did.
Right.
That's what the R.O.B did, because R.O.B has like 20 losing matchups, but then like you land one 20. Extra combo.
Try 50.
I'm sorry. Zomba, don't at me. R.O.B has like a ton of losing matches, but like he hits 1 2-frame down air or one like combo starter that is significantly impactful, and a losing matchup doesn't matter. So when the difference between losing and winning is like one single significant interaction that is feasible to get through, like not even a hard read, more of like a soft to medium read, right? Which Steve does the same. Is that really a losing matchup? I would say yes, but it is limited by how.
Right?
Yeah,
like having an out is very important.
Exactly, but it's limited by how clean people are, and I feel like R.O.B has been in the game since Brawl. People know how R.O.B works. Steve hasn't been in long enough for people to be at that level of clean where we can say for sure, like, oh, this is actually like. Is this bad for Steve, or is it even? Because we don't know how it looks when someone is actually like proficient by instinct, by heart against Steve.
It's gonna take years for Steve to have crazy nil combos like while you're nervous.
Oh yeah.
While you're like so much things are happening, right? The crowd's going.
If
crazy.
The Steves even want to,
the confetti's all over the place.
Yeah, but I more so mean like against Steve. Like let's say let's say Zero Suit beats Steve, but if Steve gets that single combo starter, he actually has a really good shot of winning. Will Zero Suits get to the point where they can be consistent enough to never get hit by that combo starter, or to only get hit 2 out of 5 games in a best of 5? Because that is the question. Can you get to that level of cleanliness where you can only limit it to 2 out of 5 games, 40% ish. So that is the question, and I think in that sense, we don't know yet. That's a TLDR. Is we don't know yet. But I think yes, but again, that's like the other question, right? Like, will thieves get to the point where they will like nil you, or will people even get to the point where they can play that clean that they can bring that like, oh, I'm not gonna get caught by the swingy combo starters at all. And I think yes, but on what scale in terms of time, what time scale, I don't know.
Yeah, and I think the first step is our current top players not getting reversaled against Steve. I think that is in terms of like
Oh, get
what I
minecarded.
saw. Well, I mean it's not easy. I'm not saying
It
that
is.
it's, but like it's really hard because when you get your advantage, you want to make the most of it, right? That's a very Smash thing to do. You want neutral. It's time for damage. It's time for my juggles. It's time for all this other stuff, right? But just really knowing how to respect it, or even knowing like how to preemptively throw out hitbox if you think they're gonna, like a Pyra doing like a fade back up air, and it's like, okay, if you anvil now, I hit you, and if you delay it, I'm up airing and I'm drifting backwards away from your delayed anvil, and you don't have the air drift to like line it up. Like little things like that, I think can go a really long way. Where and I think the best player at doing this kind of plays are Leo. Like when you watch Leo play, he and I mean obviously this helps a lot that he plays a lot of mid-range characters, but he'll put himself in positions where it's like, all right, I either hit you in my advantage state, I've got you in the corner, or I'm ledge trapping you. I either get this hit or I'm fading back towards center. Like when you create scenarios where it's like, worst case, I have center stage control. Like if you create like this advantage state flowchart around your opponent's options, and you're like, okay, I either get the hit or I get center stage. Those are generally, in terms of consistent gameplay, like that is the epitome of consistent, right? Where the worst case is center stage. Obviously, you also need to be a good enough player to abuse the center stage control. You can't just be like, oh, I never hit my opponent, I always get center, and then you just get fucked up. Like that doesn't work either. So it's not. I'm not saying that that's the only reason why Leo's good. He also is able to, he's just so good at the game. He can snowball the center stage into being extremely powerful for himself, right? So I when we see that, and I do think it's going to take time. I don't think it's a very simple solution. I think minecart and anvil, they look like really simple options, but I do think there is a ton of mix just because of the amount of space you have to separate yourself to respect the options. There are, like I said, there are a handful of characters that like, oh, hey, you're halfway across the screen, I have to respect minecart, PK Fire. Like, but not everyone has a PK Fire, right? PK Fire is actually, in my opinion, one of the better horizontal zoning tools in the game because
I think that if you incorporate player reads, it becomes a lot less scary even at a close to mid range. Like what I think in my head immediately is Jake, who has the same landing habit of minecart anvil every single time.
oh
Right. And I think that, going into that like mindset where you're at, where like you have to respect it and then it like gets super scary, is like going towards the theoretical like side of things, which is like understandable as well. But I think that it is really simple if you like start to realize that every player has habits.
Right,
I think
right.
it becomes a lot easier.
So you're
to
saying like
these.
the level one right now is the Steves aren't even mixing their minecart.
Oh yeah, definitely not.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Not at all. And I don't think that it'll get to a point where like you have to be like so optimal about it. I think that there will always be a pattern. I think there will always be like biases, and when Steves want to use these resources, these options, and I think that it'll always be extremely easy to and simple to punish if you are good at doing so. And are
Right.
I think one of the things that makes people not good at it is that they don't track resources well enough. Because more often than not, if you look at resources, you have a decent idea of how Steve wants to play. If they have like 3 or 4 iron, they're probably going to be pretty, pretty gun ho about using it. If they have like 1 or well 0 and 0 definitely option, but if they have like 1 iron, you'll see Steve's mix it up way more, right? I think it was Zachary against Shoot on Steve. I saw a little bit of gameplay where Zachary just chipped away at the iron resources as Shoot on tried to get back with Steve. And then he had 1 iron left, and Zachary was like, well, I know how you think about the game, Shuton. You're the type of player to not use the iron, right? Because you want to have that option, so you don't use it. And then Shuton died before he got to use that final iron. Because he just never got back to neutral, because Zachary understood the player well enough to understand, hey, there's a bias here to never get stuck without iron.
Certainly.
And that's exactly what you're talking about, Aaron. Is like, once you understand how these Steves make decisions based on the resources they have instead of just like looking at it as like isolated incidents. It
Or a
becomes a lot
combination of the
easier.
two.
Or, yeah, exactly. Yeah, but yeah, it becomes a lot easier to make those player reads too because
Yep.
it's super contextual.
And again, I didn't mention this. I don't think Steve players are like ultra carried. They are definitely carried to some egregious extent right now, but like it'll take a really long time for the Steve players to get to the skill level where they're even mixing up these resources like the current top players are, or I guess the legacy top players.
Yeah, and
How do
it's
you
like,
feel about that, Aaron?
About
Because
what?
like a quick question, because like you played Steve. I don't know if you're playing to pick him back up, but like
No.
resource management. Okay, resource management. But I feel like if the opponent isn't looking at your resources and using them to contextualize your options, you don't even need to mix up what you're doing based on your resources. So in that sense, will the Steves get good enough to use it? I don't know, but have they been in a position where they're forced to? Not yet, really. You know what I mean?
What? Sorry, like what are you asking?
So basically, you're saying that Steves are not really mixing up their their options based on their resources.
For sure.
But if your opponent isn't even considering the context of the resources when reading your actions, you don't need to mix up your actions based on the resources because your opponent not even looking at the resources.
Oh, it's true. I didn't even bring up the mixing up based off resources thing. I'm just saying that if you keep reading the Steve player, they will run out of resources. I think that is another. I think that is a layer to understanding like their bias and when they want to use Minecart and Anvil. But yeah, they're not thinking about it really at all ever, and
But
neither are the people
forced to.
playing against them. Yeah, they're not forced to because right now the top players are really, really bad at dealing with the options anyway. So they don't need to think about, oh, I'm going to waste my iron here.
Right,
They
it's not the
build a
Steve
wall
player's
and then they
fault.
just.
It's definitely not the
Sometimes
Steve player's fault. They're just
counter
doing
what
whatever it
is
takes
being
to win.
countered.
Exactly.
It's just like
Okay.
you clearly suck at dealing with this option. Well, let's see if you can figure out by this set, because if not, I'm gonna get this
I'm just
real and
curious
move
because
on.
I feel like there's definitely like some of the better Steves definitely know about it, but they don't pay attention to it because they don't need to. And I feel like when people start using it more,
Exactly.
I feel like it's like a very strong extra layer for Steve players because at the end of the day, right, like making reads surrounding Anvil and Minecart, well, you can do it very precisely and be safe-ish. It's still like playing with fire because if you're wrong, you're dead or you take like a full combo.
I think the tournament factor kind of also layers on top of that, right? Like, I'm not too familiar. It's tournament, like, you know what I mean? And then those moves just hit so hard. So I think that is that layer. But I think Aaron is correct in a sense where if you're a top player right now, you can't really super overthink it. Just look at your character's toolkit. Be like, okay, what will clank with Anvil as it's coming down and I can still hit Steve? What like moves can hit the minecart, and even if they jump out of the minecart, I still destroy the minecart, and then they would have to like try to commit into it with like a fair or something. But if I like fade back, you know, like just the right now, there needs to just be baseline understanding of my kit versus these two moves, minecart, anvil, right? And then from there, maybe you can start being like, okay, now I can calculate like what move kills a dirt block and what move kills this block. And but right now, fuck everything else. It's just like getting reversal by minecart and anvil are literally just like the number 1 and 2 culprits of Steve's riding this wave right now. And again, it's not really the Steve player's fault. It's everyone else's fault for just not knowing how to beat this baseline strategy of using these tools and getting reversals, right?
Exactly. So, I want to clarify. Acola, Onan, Jake, they're all very good. They
right.
Obviously. Just want to clarify that for people think I'm shit talking.
There's a reason you cannot just pick up the character and do what they're doing, right?
Oh, exactly. Yeah, like Tony said, it's a very specific skill set.
Yeah, it's a very different character.
Yeah.
I would like to specifically address some of the things that we see different in top level Aegis versus. Well, I would also like to give a bit more detail for how I was stratifying the top level Steves. For example, Onin actually uses pattern recognition along with his technical ability. Jake doesn't really have the technical ability, but he does have pattern recognition, for example. And then Yanni obviously has technical ability, but his pattern recognition is a lot weaker than the other two. So the what Onin also can do is he does mix up. He does have mix-ups. It's not super complicated, deep mix-ups, but he doesn't
Mhm.
need them because he's the only Steve who has mix-ups. So
Exactly. Yeah.
like you don't have
Acola has
practice
mix-ups.
against Steve with
He's
mix-ups.
the only Steve in the US.
What
Because Acola has mix-ups.
who has played against Acola and Onin
Yeah,
is
I
my
mean
first
that's
question.
fair, but I'm just
So
clarifying because
the so my point being here that you can't have practiced for Onin or Acola because you've never played against a Steve who has mix-ups until you've played one of them. As less true in Japan because I actually think there's multiple Wi-Fi Steves who have mix-up abilities. But the point I'm getting at here is that Onin does have that. If you ask someone who has played against Onin, I believe it was Sean actually traveled over and beat Onin multiple times in his travels. And if you listen to his interview at one of the big events that he beat Onin in, he specifically says that he was caught off guard because he hadn't actually run into a Steve who mixed up before. He hadn't actually had a Steve use a Minecraft table as a bait before. He just was completely unprepared for these, even though if you tell someone, hey, you can spawn an item and then you swing and your opponent will react to the item, it's like, yeah, I've seen Diddy play before, but no other Steve
true,
has done that.
kind of.
Like not on this continent. So the idea though is that people aren't prepared for certain layers of play because they haven't actually played against that before. And so it's a matter of, oh, well, I can beat this kind of Steve. Well, can you beat that kind of Steve? And uh,
I feel like most Steves, just to add a little bit to that point, I feel like most Steves just spend a lot of time creating a more complex flowchart. And the flowcharts get complex, right? But that mix-up part of the flowchart is the part that's underdeveloped. So most of the times when you load into a Steve, it's like it's a Dark Souls boss. You have to understand the flowchart. You have to understand the patterns. And once you do, you execute that perfectly. And if you mess up, you die, and you try again. Whereas for someone like Onin, it's less of a Dark Souls boss and a little bit more towards like traditional Smash in that sense. And I feel like that caught everyone off guard at SmashCon, where it's like, oh, this player forces me to play against the player as well as the character. So yeah, I mean I agree with what you're saying, Tony. I just wanted to clarify that because I feel like when you say, oh, this is the only Steve that mix-ups, people like my first question would be like, okay, so how do other Steves win? And I think the answer is like they just have like really complex and well-developed flowcharts.
I think that most Steves are not very conscious about when they decide to do something else. As in, they don't think, oh, well, the opponent's clearly
Just
playing
like Dark
around
Souls
this.
boss.
I can see that they're thinking this or that. I bet that it would throw them off if I did this instead. Like that's just not a common thought process you're gonna see. You're gonna see something more akin of, oh well, they're at this percent. These things are gonna work. These things are gonna mix up for those things, and that's just where their player line stops. It's like they're aware that mix-ups exist. They can't read the opponent and the opponent's thought process. Like they don't know how the opponent is feeling as well, unless they're having some very overt stress, which they're probably accustomed to seeing. The What you have for Acola though is a lot of his wins are not things you see on the screen. They're very implicit, and that's more of what I consider like a hallmark of more in the true top player range, like the not just being on PGR, but being at like the people are going to make top 8. Is a lot of their wins are things that you can't understand unless you specifically understand the game well enough to perceive. Wait a second. So these situations paired together, and then you're here, and their risk reward in the follow up position is not very good, and you didn't actually take risks to put them into that position because of these things working together, and it's that is what I think sets Acola apart from every other Steve. Is he has that ability on top of also having a lot of other hallmark fundamentals. Something else Onin has over a lot of the North American Steves that I would say Diddy is the other major player who has this, is he understands things like vertical undershooting and that he'll intentionally use normals as a bait and then he'll whiff something and then he'll whiff over you, and then he'll plane around you trying to react to any of the whiffs late. And so usually Onin puts in actions in threes. Like he'll put in a whiff for you to swing at, and then he'll put out an overshooting aerial above your head to catch you for trying to jump in over it. So he'll do something like jab and then immediately short hop up air, and then he'll swing like a fair back air after the up air. And the idea is if you react to either of the first two things, either the first one late or the which it's not possible to react to a jab whiff and directly punish it. But if you do try and position in on it, you're going to jump into his second aerial. And something else he does is like sometimes it's up air, sometimes it's nair. He's changed that up. Something Onin actually just picked up in the last, I think, month or so is footstool down air, which is something we do see in other Steve players. But that's something Acola has been doing for a while. Something Onin has been picking up that Acola has been doing is like up till up smash at mid percents. Usually you don't see up smash from Steve players until it's going to kill, or if it's at like a 0% finisher. But both Onin and Acola understand that just going for up till up smash is itself its own value, and you'll see them go for more raw reads like that. But Diddy is also very good at that. What Diddy doesn't have that players like Onin have is Onin has a lot of option selects on block, and also he has, I think, a better breadth of block setups. So a lot of times when you see Onin setting up a wall, he'll actually, if he thinks his opponent isn't pressuring him, he'll put up a 3-stack, and which is also like on an execution level, his 3 stacks are very fast, very efficient. And then he'll immediately confirm the situation. And then if he thinks you're not pressuring him, he'll put an upside down L stack that usually, or rather, I should say, especially if he has a secondary resource that's not like dirt, then he'll put up that L stack, and he's pretty much guaranteed a diamond if he does this. And a lot of the times you'll see other Steves, they try to be a bit more efficient with their block placements. They'll go for like a single diagonal to cover short hop ends, but they don't put out like hard block setups where the only way you can swing out and beat the 7-stack block is by putting out a really laggy thing that he can easily react to on whiff, or if you are just a particularly ranged sword character. And so I think those are some of the things that really set them apart. And on that note, just quick digression. I've seen sentiments like Sephiroth hard counter Steve, but the results definitely don't agree with this at all. And somebody asked me about this, and I believe the exact way they phrased it was, how is Sephiroth not a losing matchup for Steve? He can just swing through the blocks and hit Steve. And it's, yeah, but how is Sephiroth keeping Steve from hitting him? And the idea is that Sephiroth still can do that, but if Steve decides to play the matchup as Luigi, it's a lot harder for Sephiroth to keep him out because his risk reward is so much better than
Acola is
Sephiroth.
really good at that too. Acola plays Steve as like, like we said last time,
Whatever it
he's a
needs to be.
Shoto. Yeah, but and
he played
I
Luigi
think,
before, so
exactly. Like Acola, and this sounds scrubby as hell, but Acola is the only Steve that I see that uses roll and up tilt. Roll and up tilt is absolutely an insane move. There's a reason that Shoto's players like roll in as approaches too, right? And for Steve is the same thing. So there's a lot in terms of like using positional advantages as win conditions in neutral that Steves can improve, that you, even someone like Onin who does really well, that don't really apply. And that's where, for example, like the whiff baits that Tony talked about are so huge. And I think you guys have probably all seen like the Japanese player who made like the anti-Steve guide. And while I think it's
shout out.
Yeah.
Yep.
It had good knowledge. I would have loved to see a little bit more about the strategy, but I mean, it's still like every little bit helps. Something that I think he pointed out that people kind of like don't look at is the auto cancel window for forward air and especially back air, because the forward air is a little bit less significant, but for back air, because it's a little bit slower, he whiffs a back air near ground height, like while he's descending from his short hop, and it still auto cancels. So in terms of like baiting people in with whiffs, like that is absolutely insane. That is absolutely insane because you see a landing back air, his back air is strong, it's relatively laggy, and then he just acts immediately. And then he acts immediately, not just with like anything, he acts immediately with like a run up jab. And if you get hit, you take a full combo. So yeah, like just treating that as a win condition rather than treating mining as a win condition, will add like a whole nother layer strategy to Steve in the West. That I think is also going to help us prepare for the Steves in the East, because taking after Acola means that they're generally going to be more focused on that close quarter win condition.
I agree with what you're saying. Even though I think Steve is going to immensely fall off, I think that what Steves need to focus on are things like that. Scrubby options, roll in, up tilt, spam the broken stuff that is just truly good on shield, on block, that doesn't really have like a solid answer besides like just fundamentally outplay your opponent. Also, like the whole block stacking thing, that's the future of Steve. Playing as lame as possible. That is the future.
The block formations. Yep, definitely.
Just keep drawing dicks
Tetris,
everywhere.
bro.
Amen, brother.
Tetris.
Tetris. All right, well,
Florida man on the Coach's Corner podcast.
Just keep drawing them, man. Into up smash. It's true. It's a true combo.
True combo. All right. Well, that is actually going to be it for us. We went a little bit over, but there is a lot to talk about, of course. But in the comments, please let us know which character you think is better, Aegis or Steve. You know, we kind of gave a breakdown. We gave our opinions, present day, future, all that stuff. But yeah, until next time, class dismissed.